Welcome back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. We're positively into the summer months. And as Luke Jones, and I always say, Luke's always out in Owings Mills. Luke's not in Owings Mills right now. We're on shutdown here for a couple of weeks. The NFL never takes a day off. And this poor guy's trying to vacation anywhere that's not humidity that like they have down there in Houston. Sometimes he spends some time here in the great state of Maryland. He is the venerable longtime Aller and now Texans insider, but he loves when I invite him on in July because he knows we're talking about his favorite thing that's not Waco and Baylor, the Houston Astros, who cleaned the Orioles' clocks again last week, and I'm sure will be again by the time you're listening to this. John McClain joins us from the Houston Chronicle, not necessarily to talk football, although there is a little something brewing down there with the quarterback situation in your franchise. But I call about baseball right now because we're in the middle of this thing you were in the middle of 5-6 years ago, which is some really, really awful baseball right now, John.
Nestor, this is the worst team the Orioles have had in their rebuild. After I watched them in that last series against the Astros, I thought, is this the worst? So I thought I would ask you, is it?
I was here in 88. You know what I mean? And John, here's the part that is so weird to sports because you're even older than me. You've been at it longer than me, but they were all trying at one point, right? I mean, we had this thing with the NBA where the Sixers were tanking and teams are tanking to get picks and whatever. Baseball has a whole culture of this, right? Like, and I don't even know what you get when you tank and you finish second like last year, and you don't even take the second best player because, he's got the wrong agent. He's going to cost you too much money or whatever. All of it's really weird. And the NFL, and I know you cover the NFL professionally. We're both blessed to be doing that for most of our professional lives. Boy, the NFL system was set up right in the early days to make, even if you're really bad, unless you're Cleveland or really awful management where Washington is right now, to be really awful for a long period of time is hard to do. In baseball, it's almost easy to be awful, and you just sell it to your fans and you say, we're going to stink and we're going to rebuild. Look at what they did in Houston, and that's what they're selling here right now, and that's a tough sell.
One of the things the Astros did, they didn't shy away from any prospects because they were represented by an agent like Scott Boras. They actually welcomed it. And one time when they drafted Carlos Correa first overall, Boras represented Lance McCullers Jr. He had committed to play at Florida State. He wanted a lot of money. Correa took less. It allowed them to get McCullers, and both of them helped them win a World Series, go to a World Series, and lose to Washington. And last year, come within one victory of a World Series. And now, except for this last series at Detroit, they've been doing some serious thumping at a time when hitters are supposed to be taking a back seat to the pitchers. And now they're cracking down the pitchers. The Astros have been killing the baseball, leading in almost every statistic you can have because of hitting. And they don't have George Springer this year. They let him get away to Toronto. Carlos Correa turned down an offer of $20 million a year. He's probably going to get $30 million a year. I'd be shocked if they bring him in back here, which would be too bad because he's one of their all-time great players. And when they've taken all this abuse from fans the last 2 years, he's been out at the forefront. He welcomes it and revels in it. And so I think this about Correa. If they let him get on the market, he's gone. And they move Alex Bregman to shortstop. But man, if you take Springer and you take Correa out of this lineup, they still have some good hitters, but it's not going to have the power and the productivity that they have this season. And they've at one point this year they got swept at home by the Tigers, got swept in Arlington by the Rangers, and then they bounced back and won 11 in a row, and the all-time record's 12, and they went to Detroit and they split and they couldn't hit. The Tigers pitchers who had been drafted high, they bamboozled the Astros hitters, and AJ Hinch finished the season 5-2 against his former team, even though the Tigers are terrible, not Orioles terrible. I'll be there tonight. It's raining like crazy in Houston. Roof will be closed, of course, but I look forward to watching them. But I'll tell you what, I feel bad for the great baseball fans in Baltimore. You hope that finally someday there's light at the end of the tunnel, but boy, right now, when I see that Orioles team that I saw against the Astros and may see again here at Minute Maid Park, boy, that nothing but darkness in that tunnel.
John, it's been a little while since we talked baseball, man. I think we talked football once, twice last year, obviously with the Houston and Tennessee and what you've done for a living and what I do in football season. I don't know a bigger Astros fan than you, even 8 years ago when they stunk. And, I've known you a long time. And the cheating part of this that you've covered with Belichick and the Patriots and Deflategate, really, I mean, you're always sitting there at the combine. You're always sitting there at the owners meeting. I mean, you're there amidst all of this. You're a fan of the Astros. I haven't beaten you up in the last year and a half about this. They didn't even basically play baseball last year. Eddie Feiner or whatever hell that thing was in September that we did around here. But boy, the cheating in the Astros and the fan base and what you're not of the mindset that it was as bad as I think it is. I think it was atrocious. I mean, I'm Venezuelan and I will never look at Altuve the same way. I'm an Orioles fan and we have Elias and Mydell here. The the stench of the cheating and the beating of the trash cans, I'm embarrassed for you as an Astros fan in a way that maybe I wasn't even embarrassed for the Patriots people because of how sort of systemic it was and they got outed by a fan on the internet.
There you go. Not checking the facts about Altuve like everybody else. He is the number one villain, and he gets just ripped everywhere he goes. Even though there have been books by reputable people that have exonerated him, even though one guy admitted he did a fake account of Carlos Beltran's sister to say that Altuve wore a buzzer that would go off to tell him what the pitch was, totally made up, proven by the guy that admitted he used a
Why didn't
fake
he want his
account.
shirt ripped off?
And because he said the last time he did it, his wife raised all kind of cane. She came out, well, Correa and his wife came out and said that afterward. Altuve's never said anything. He's not going to not have his jersey ripped off. Thinking he's wearing a buzzer is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. And also, there was a book done that listened was super enhanced everything that season and told the percentages of the trash can banging that was done for players. And Altuve's was the lowest. And when it was, he would step out of the batter's box and glare at the dugout because he had told them he did not want it. So he is a false villain. Others, Correa, Springer, those guys, you can get them. But Altuve, in fact, there's a new book out by a longtime baseball writer that also points out Altuve didn't participate in it. But I think it was who was it with the Dodgers that Altuve cheated and stole the MVP award from Aaron Judge, and that got a lot of it going. Cody Bellinger, that's who it was. But
Let's say the
anyway,
outfielder.
people
Yeah.
people are going to believe what they want to believe, no matter how much proof there is. Because once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't put it back. And yes, I think it was terrible what they did, but they didn't do it on the road. They beat the Dodgers like crazy on the road. The Dodgers couldn't hit. Nobody was blaming their pitching staff. Now, if you look back, their pitching staff was great. And those guys' spin rate was tremendous. And I'm sure they're doctoring the ball like all baseball pitchers have been proven to do for years. But because it was trash cans and because they won, nobody complained when they lost in 7 games to Washington and became the first team in history to lose 4 World Series games. They still say they were cheating. Well, if they're cheating, how do you lose 4 World Series games at home? But anyway, yes, it's bad. It'll always have an asterisk next to it, and it'll always be tainted, and the players know it.
John McClain is here, the Houston Chronicle, the longtime Hall of Fame voter and longtime insider with the Oilers and now with the Houston Texans. We'll get to some football stuff here, but I'm having too much fun talking baseball with you, John, as the Orioles and the Astros get together again. Hopefully, they won't strike out 23 times this time. But, on the baseball side of things, my heritage, my 16 years now, the Orioles took my press credentials 16 years ago. It's been 16 seasons now that it's been gone. And I try to. I have the dumpster fire behind me, and they're in last place. And I was supposed to go to Bowie this weekend and see Grayson Rodriguez pitch, and we didn't make it down there, but we still might. And Rutschman and where they are with their Double A talent. But then there's just the part of the sport itself, the cheating of the Astros, how bad it was, or however people want to portray it. This pine tar thing, they're going after pitchers with rosin and stripping pitchers down. And the broadcast here are just awful, right? Like, just there's nobody at the games. The team stinks. It's not easy to follow. The shifting of the games, the MIT-ification of the games, all the analytics. What do you love about it? I mean, other than the fact your team's really good, right? Finally, you watched a lot of bad baseball, I guess after Mike Scott and that group before, the last 25 years. But I often ask people that still love baseball, that are playing rotisserie, following games, out on the app, watching late night games, watching the Dodgers play the Giants this week. I, I don't see the game that way anymore. And I was very in tight with it, as you know. I mean, I was traveling, going to games, going to 150 games a year. When I watch it now, it really feels like a different game than the one I left even 6 or 7 years ago when Buck Showalter was doing his magic here.
I've been fascinated by baseball since 1960 when I was 8 and I watched Bill Mazeroski hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth at Forbes Field to beat the Yankees, my favorite team then because the Astros didn't weren't
You
born
didn't have a
until
team, right? Literally.
1962, and the Yankees were shown every Saturday on the Falstaff Game of the Week with Pee Wee Reese and Dizzy Dean. I never missed one of those games. And all my buddies in Little League wore 7 because of Mickey Mantle, and I wore 9 for Roger Maris just to be different. And so I've loved the game since that year. They played 2 All-Star games for a while instead of one, watching Willie Mays hit a triple. And I think about Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and Roberto Clemente playing in an outfield. There's no 3 outfielders they could put from either league on the field today that would match that, not to mention all the other greats. So I was fascinated because it was pure and it was fun. And it doesn't, I've known people have to be stupid or naive to think there hadn't been cheating going on in every sport as long as players have been able to get away with it. In baseball, it seems to be more. I used to love to watch Gaylord Perry pitch and watch him go through his his semantics before every pitch to make people think he was doctoring the baseball with sweat coming off his cap or something behind his ear. It was fascinating to watch that. And what I don't like about it today, Nestor, is I don't like how long the games are and how many relief pitchers come in. Today, if a pitcher pitched 7 innings, they want to pop champagne corks and celebrate. When there was so many great pitchers throughout history, if they threw 7 innings, they would be embarrassed. You think, well, why can't pitchers throw more? Why can't they be like Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale, and Bob Gibson and Nolan Ryan and Warren Spahn and some of the greatest pitchers in history? Is it because their arms are conditioned differently, which I guess it is. But I used to love to watch pitchers go the distance and great pitchers. And today it's hard for me to say a pitcher's great when all he does is pitch 7 innings, but you got to, those are the sign of the times, and that's the reality. And that's the way the game is played. But I hate how long it is. I hate how many pitchers come into the game. I first didn't like the extra inning rule of the runner on second. And then I started thinking, oh my God, all the long games. I'm not a purist. I wish they would have another wild card team. The more teams that are in the playoffs, the more excitement it is for multiple cities at the end of the year. I loved interleague play when they finally got it. They're experimenting with some unbelievable rules in the minor leagues. You're talking about going to Bowie. When the Astros were bad, we'd go down to Corpus Christi, the AA team, to see Carlos Correa because people were so captivated by him on his way up to the big boys. And so I love watching minor league baseball. In a suburb of Houston, Sugarland, Jim Crane bought that franchise, and now it's the AAA team, the Sugarland Skeeters, and they only have about a 20-mile drive downtown from their ballpark when they bring guys up and move them down. So I don't like the length of the games, and I don't mind guys doctoring the baseball. I love watching great pitching, but to me, you can't beat hitting. And it's like that old Braves commercial with their pitchers, chicks dig the long ball. I think everybody digs the long ball, but the problem is all the uppercuts. You're about velocity. You're about the way they either, it's almost like it's a home run or a single. I hate the shift, but it'd be like saying outlawing zone defenses in pro football. Do you do it just because the defense is great? Pitchers learn to pitch, fielders learn to field. Why can't hitters hit to the left side? Or if they shift you to the left, hit to the right side. Learn to bunt. Learn to do some of the things that they've done forever. But now it's like it's a home run or a single or a long ground out or line out, which I do not like. But I think some of the things they're experimenting in the minor leagues with, like making the bases bigger to help them steal more bases. How about getting guys on there that know how to steal bases? And but it's still a great game. I still love it. I'll be at Minute Maid Park to see the Orioles and the Astros on Monday night because I just love the game.
John McClain is here. No one has covered the sport of football finer this century or last than he at the Houston Chronicle. He covers all things Houston Texans, but is by bloodline a Houston Astros fan. I never asked you, how'd you feel when they switched leagues? I mean, we've dealt with the whole Terps fallout of Duke and Maryland a decade later. We're still here talking about it. Things worked out okay for the Astros down there, and it gives you a chance to sauce it up with the Rangers, right?
Yeah, and I hate anything involving Dallas. I don't hate the
That makes two of
Cowboys.
us.
I hate the Cowboys fans. There's so many of them down here. People say, well, how in the world are there so many Cowboy fans in Houston? Well, that comes from winning all those Super Bowls. And I tell people who are the Texans or anybody, Cowboy fans in Houston, they're just like mosquitoes, roaches, humidity, traffic jams, and crime. You learn to live with them. And there's no other way to look at it. And I the Rangers, when they swept the Astros up there this year, I was tweeting and talking about on my radio shows. I don't write about the Astros, so I don't mind saying that I'm a fan of the Astros. People here have known me to say that for decades. But when they got swept by the lowly Rangers, I said that was the worst series they've had in their team's history. And then they swept the Rangers when they came down here, but that was a low point. And so when they went to the American League, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to stay up later to watch all the games against teams on the West Coast. And I didn't like breaking up their traditional rivalries with the National League teams. But now I'll tell you the truth, Nestor. My wife goes to bed, and instead of us fighting over the TV when the Astros are on, she goes to bed. Those games are played on the West Coast. I can kick back, relax, turn it up as loud as I want, and watch every pitch of every game. So I've adjusted to it.
My wife is adjusted to watching soccer every afternoon this week for Euro. She says baseball stinks. She's not wrong about that. But you're loving baseball, but covering football. All right, let's. You've covered a lot of things in Houston, John. Right? I mean, like Oilers and comings and goings, and Bud Adams and Love You Blue, and not having a franchise, and courting Super Bowls into your city a couple of times. Boy, this thing going on with the quarterback down there and the franchise in the middle of all of it creates this sort of cloud over all of it. What's going on in Houston with football right now, John?
People are really down on the Texans, as you can imagine. They got a new head coach in David Culley. Everybody likes David Culley. I hope the guy can win. He's not going to win this year because everybody thinks Texans are going to be the worst team in the NFL. They have 50 new players. I've never seen a team bring in 50 new players. 42 are veterans. Most are on 1 and 2 year contracts. The only one that Nick Caserio signed as more than a 2 year contract was a punter from the Eagles, Cameron Johnston. So they got a lot of veteran players here who have played well and were injured last year, or played well, went to another team and didn't play well for some reason. So they're in here on basically a make it season. And they know if they do well, they got a chance next year when the cap increases significantly to get a good contract. So they're willing to take that chance to come here. And the problem was after last season, Deshaun Watson demanded to be traded, told the Texans he'll sit out, he'll lose millions of dollars, he'll do anything he can to be traded. And they said no. When Nick Caserio was hired from New England as general manager, he said no, Deshaun Watson's our quarterback. When that was the first week of January. Then they brought in David Culley as the head coach in January, and he said, no, he's our starting quarterback. And so in February, Watson finally communicated with the Texans executive, and it was David Culley in a Zoom call. And Culley told him everything he could about how they were going to rebuild around him. He was a centerpiece, how much they loved him. And, he's under contract through 2025. He's also only 26 years old and coming off a third consecutive great season, his best season last year by far. He improved in every statistic. It didn't translate into victories because they lost 8 one-score games, and it was the fault of the worst run defense in the league, second worst run offense, and one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So he said he wanted to be traded. He told Culley, look, I'm glad you got the job. I wish you the best of luck, but I want out. I haven't changed. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sit out. I'll absorb the fines, but I'm not going to play for the Texans again. So Culley came back, met with Casario. They met with the coaches, the owner, and they made the decision in February they would trade him. And they would try to do it before the draft, and they would try to maximize it. 8 teams that I know of, Nestor, let them know that they were interested in him if they wanted to negotiate. At that time, the plan was to get through free agency, in which they knew they were going to sign a lot of players and get rid of a lot of players. And then around April 1st, they'd start call all the teams back that had been interested and see who was serious, try to get those teams bidding against each other. They thought over the next couple of years they could get 3-1s, 2-2s, maybe a starter on offense or defense. The key was just to get teams bidding against each other. And there were a lot that were ready to do that. And then boom, lawsuits started being filed against Watson for sexual assault and sexual misconduct, 22 in all. And now all the interest was put on hold. And until those legal issues are resolved, they're not going to be trading him. The NFL's investigating, the police are investigating, and the NFL could put him on the commissioner's exempt list. Only Roger Goodell determines that. He would get paid his base salary to not play this season. If the legal issues were resolved, say start a camp, then would they trade him right away? Depends on the offer. They're not going to give him away. And I think the best chance to maximize the value would be to wait till next year's draft when you see quarterbacks like Daniel Jones with the Giants, Jared Goff with Detroit. They've got 2-1s. Then Philadelphia, what happens with Jalen Hurts? They've got 2-1s, could be 3. Carson Wentz plays 75% of the plays or 70%, and the Colts make the playoffs. So those options would be better. But I know this, they want to move on. And I know this, Watson wants to move on. He's been working out like crazy since the end of last season in Georgia, his home state, and he wants to be ready to hit the ground running when the time comes that he can play again. But right now, Nestor, that doesn't look like anytime soon. And their starter is Tyrod Taylor, and their backup is Jeff Driscoll. And the one that people are most excited about was their first pick, third overall, Davis Mills, a quarterback from Stanford, who started only 11 games and played in only 14. He is the most popular guy in town, even though he's never taken a snap.
John McClain is here from Houston, Texas, where they beat our baseball team regularly. I'm sure we'll beat them a little bit more often this week. All above board now. There's no cheating going on anymore, we don't think. And if there is, I hope our side's doing it. He's covering all things football. Just the last thing on the Watson thing. Girls, allegations, all of that. He's done. He will not put a Texans helmet on anymore. And you're convinced of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. He was not going to put a Texans helmet on again before all these lawsuits. He wanted out, and he didn't want to be part of the rebuild. He didn't want to start over with new people. And they got rid of a lot of his teammates, a lot of his favorite players. And so he was gone. Now, they could have forced him to play. They could have let him sit out for 3 years. But, what's the point? If the guy wants to go, he's not going to be back, and you firmly believe that, then you got to get the best deal possible. And there were a lot of teams willing to pay a lot to try to get Deshaun Watson.
Well, obviously, he has his own issues, but for his story over the last couple of years, for the franchise, for O'Brien, for the deals, uh, it's been something to chronicle of, I show that how awful the Orioles have been, since 1993 for the most part, right? Like, this has really been a tough time in the aftermath of all that you've gone through in regard to let's recruit a franchise, let's get an owner, let's bring an owner in that'll try to do it the right way, and we'll do all. And here you are from scratch, kind of again as a franchise, right?
Well, fans here act like the Texans have been bad for a long time. And I point out, I said, bad for a long time. Detroit, Cincinnati, Jacksonville. There's a lot of teams. Texans won 4 out of 5 division titles. This time last year, they were coming off a playoff victory over Buffalo, blew a 24-0 lead at Kansas City. People were fired up. Then they go 4-12. O'Brien fired after an 0-4 start. So they've been bad for 1 year. And they're going to be bad this season, probably bad 2022. But next year, they have their number one pick. They should have another 1 or 2 picks for Deshaun Watson, and then they'll have full salary cap, and they'll roll over some cap money. So then they might be more willing to spend on free agency for veteran players who can actually play. But people here are resigned to the fact they're going to be terrible this year. And to me, if you're going to be bad, be like the Rockets, be all the way bad. The difference is the Rockets got the second pick instead of the first pick like they deserve. But in the NFL, if you're the worst, you get that first pick like Jacksonville.
John, I hear you saying that
Losing
right now.
15 in a
Brother,
row.
I follow you on Twitter, man. The first time they're getting scorched 34-6 in the fourth quarter, it's like me with the Orioles. Yeah, rebuild it. We're going to lose how much and how bad for how long? I mean, it is really tough to say, well, we're going to rebuild it to the citizens of Houston and the fans of the Texans and hope that it comes. At least in the NFL, you can rebuild it kind of quickly, unlike in baseball where it takes a long time. But I feel bad for the Texans fans. My cousin's one of them. She lives down there in Katy. She comes to the games. You've had a meal with my cousin. I feel bad for the Texans fans because I feel like there's a representative amount of cool stuff there, the stadium, the logo, the new franchise, like all of that. I think this has been kind of an ugly period for them these last couple of years where they had something awesome and it just kind of got torched.
This last been 1 year. It started with DeAndre Hopkins trade, and then last year they had the toughest schedule I've seen in my 45 years of covering the NFL. They started 0-4, and before the schedule the only time it was easy is when they played Jacksonville, and they beat them twice. And so the fans here have only had one bad year. They've had some where they were let down. And as you know, nothing's worse than losing your franchise. I've had a lot of people say, man, is this the worst offseason you've ever gone through? I say, are you kidding me? The worst is when you lose your franchise and you think you're not going to get another one. This one doesn't compare to that one when the Oilers left after the 1996 season for Nashville, and they didn't get a replacement until 1999. It started in 2002. So nothing comes close to that.
I promise you on some night I'll be trapped in Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, somewhere, and I'll see a very, very angry version of you on Twitter. You'll say something because you're the most, frank columnist I know. They're terrible. They're awful. And I'm going to send you back. If you're going to be bad, be all the way bad, because that was your quote. So I'll remember when they're all the way bad.
You'll see me ripping them if they win a game, because the worst they could do is be like the Rockets and don't get that top pick. The problem right now, one thing the Texans have to figure out at some point this season, they have to play the rookie quarterback, Davis Mills. The bag comes after 9 games. So I've been saying the last 8 games he needs to play and give him 2 weeks to get ready, because if he could show them he could be the quarterback and the odds are against him, it would impact 2022 draft. If he doesn't, like we expect, then they've got to do everything they can to get a quarterback. And right now, there's no Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck, and there's a lot of prospects. And the last 3, I used examples. At this time, before Joe Burrow's last season at LSU, nobody even knew who he was. Kyler Murray wasn't a starter at Oklahoma at this point, and Zach Wilson had to compete for a starting job his last year at Brigham Young. So there might be a quarterback out there that turns out to be pretty good they can get. But right now, for this season, Nestor, it is bleak.
John McClain here, joining us for another wise conversation from our friends at the Wise Markets. Of course, supporting all that we're doing around here, and always a great conversation to check in with you, especially when I keep football for football season. You give me a little Astros look here this week. I'm glad you're having a good time with your baseball team. It is fun winning, and it's no fun at all when you're not winning. But football season's here. We have Lamar. He's pretty good, huh?
Pretty good. He's exciting. I love watching the Ravens play. They play old time football, led the league in rushing the last 2 years. There was only 3 teams that ran the ball more than they threw it. And I'll tell you what, with David Culley coming from the Ravens to the Texans, and they've signed Mark Ingram, they signed Philip Lindsay from Denver, Rex Burkhead from New England to go with David Johnson. They have 4 veteran backs and a veteran offensive line. This team is going to run the ball a lot more. Last year, they ran fewest times in history and ran for the second fewest yards to their inaugural season of 2002. That will change because a good running game can be an equalizer. But so it's going to be a different strategy with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback, and people here are interested. Might not be fired up, but they're interested because so much is new.
I'll never forget sitting up there on the roof with you in that empty stadium with masks on 9 months ago. One of the stranger experiences of my sportsdom over all these years. John, I love you. I appreciate you coming on. Astros still cheated. You'll never convince me anything else, but that will not stop me
I'm
from
not
having
trying
Mexican
to
food
convince
with
you
you.
they didn't cheat. I told you you shouldn't be having all that venom for Jose Altuve. Yes, they cheated.
He's Venezuelan. He's one of my people. I'll give him we'll have crabs together one day from Maracaibo. John, I appreciate you, brother. Take care of yourself, all right?
Thank you very much,
Enjoy the
Nestor.
game down there in
Appreciate it.
Houston, Texas. Stay cool, deep in the heart of Texas. John McClain, you can follow him, McClain, on NFL. He's out on Twitter as well as at the Houston Chronicle. You can find me anywhere those wise conversations are. I got a new mug. Rob Santoni gave me a mug. He keeps my drinks nice and cool here for summertime. Appreciate our friends at Wise Markets, as well as the Heritage Fair coming up in Dundalk this weekend with Crack the Sky. I'm Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos in Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.